Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of a new show on Pod and Roku TV, our international TV and podcast station, World Politics. We welcome you to this new show, and I want to thank Kimberly Calhoun and Nick Paladiva, the founders of our network, for bringing us this far in our journey in global media. It's truly been an honor to be a part of the leadership team here hosting a show. Today, we're going to talk about the primaries in the United States of America, the presidential primaries. But before I do, I want to go ahead and update you on some major things going on in the world. First of all, this is a disruptive, turbulent time in the world, economically, politically. The entire international rules-based system of politics seems to have been completely disrupted in the last few years. It starts with Kim Jong-un meeting Vladimir Putin, the premier and dictator in Russia. According to pundits, he's left by train and he is on his way there, and they're going to be talking. And it's very, very concerning to many of us that these two dictators are forming some kind of alliance. The Biden administration will unlock $6 billion of Iranian funds to release 5 Iranian prisoners as part of a deal to free 5 American citizens. ARM, a chip maker owned by SoftBank Group, a tech giant, will stop taking orders for shares of its IPO one day earlier than planned. The average pay in Britain, excluding bonuses, is growing at an annual rate of 7.8%. And we know that over 2,000 people have died in the earthquake in Marrakesh, and we pray for them. The figure of the day I want to share with you is 35 minutes, the amount of sleep that people in Asian countries miss compared with elsewhere in the world. Maybe that's why India, the new tiger in our global economy, is working, because apparently Prime Minister Modi does not sleep or sleep very much. With that being said, let's go to the topic of the day, presidential primaries. Get out your popcorn if you're watching the presidential politics today. Yes, we have a former president who's been charged with a number of crimes and hasn't been convicted, whether it's hush money, whether it's insurrection against the Capitol, whether it's, I'm losing count, but he's still 30 points ahead as the Republican nominee and is projected to be the Republican nominee for president of the United States against Joseph R. Biden, the oldest living president in the United States of America's history, at a young age of 83 years old. So we could be headed to a rematch. But what's interesting about American politics is the primaries. The primaries have become, rather than positioning different alliances within these parties, it's really become the extremes of each party driving their nominees forward. Democrats have to go far to the left to get their endorsements in their primaries. And this is not only in presidential, but it's also in state politics and local politics. And the same thing on the right. It used to be that political parties were parties that actually helped form policy. We often forget that Lyndon Johnson, when he was a Democrat, had to bring in segregationists from the South with Northerners and Democrats to actually come together on different pieces of legislation like civil rights reform, voting rights legislation. Well, that just doesn't happen anymore today. So we're going to talk about the presidential primary process today on our show. Does it make sense? Do we need to do something different? Would perhaps rank order voting be better, where the forward party is talking about that, where you would just rank your top 2 choices? Whoever got the second most votes, if the first person didn't win, that second person would go in. So that way, it's not all over the map like it is. Billions of dollars being spent. The campaign is underway. Today, we welcome you to World Politics, where we're going to talk about these issues. Today, we have with us Nick Paladiva, the founder of the network, Adam Lamparello, a law professor who's been a frequent guest, and we love his fiery spirit on the show, Kimberly Calhoun, and anyone else that wants to join. So let's get started. Nick, welcome. Adam, welcome. And Kim, welcome to World Politics. I was my first appearance on this international show. I didn't really practice because I didn't know I was doing it until about 10 minutes ago, but hope I passed the test. And want to welcome you all to World Politics. And let's just dive into some of these world issues real quick, and then we're going to go into the topic of the day, presidential primaries. And I'd like to start with Professor Lamparello on this topic. But North Korea, Russia, what are you all concerned about this? I'm going to bed at night a little concerned that Kim Jong Il might be having some vodka with Vladimir Putin. What are your thoughts, Nick?
No, I'm not concerned because they're in bed together anyway. I mean, so the interesting thing that I find out is Russia really has to buy arms from North Korea. They can't manufacture it themselves. Are they that pathetic that they can't manufacture bullets over there in Russia? So that's my thoughts on the Kim Jong-un Putin meeting. I do want to hear from Adam because I was very impressed with Adam. He called Roe versus Wade correctly a couple of years ago that was going to be repealed way before it was going to be repealed. So we know that Adam has a crystal ball. We know he's got a crystal ball. So I want to listen to the guy who's got the crystal ball to tell us where this American politics is going to go. Because I know he knows, because he's got the crystal ball, who's going to win the primaries and who's going to win the general election. So, put it up.
The answer to both questions, Nick, is Donald Trump. And one of the things that Donald Trump will have to thank for that is these 4 ridiculous indictments against him, 3 of which are so meritless that they don't even merit discussion. The indictment in New York was politically motivated. January 6th, Donald Trump did not incite violence. And in Atlanta, the RICO charge against 19 defendants will either be dismissed or reversed on appeal. But it's going to motivate and galvanize Trump's voters. And as you see in the primaries right now, Trump's ahead by 30 points. That's not going to change. He's going to win the Republican primary, and he's going to defeat Joe Biden probably by between 2 and 4 points. And he will make America great again.
With that said, I guess the first question to ask Adam, and Adam, I am a moderate Democrat, but I'm going to be my best to be kind of a host of the show. But my question is, do you think the primaries then, if he's that far ahead, is it really a positioning for who's the vice presidential nominee? And right now, what are you thinking? Trump DeSantis, Trump Nikki Haley, or is it too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell, but I could see Trump Nikki Haley more than I could see Trump DeSantis. And like you said, you're a moderate Democrat. Well, I'm a moderate too. I don't identify as Republican or Democrat. But one thing I will say is this. The country has not done well under Joe Biden. President Trump's policies were, for the most part, quite good. The economy, our relations, our international relations were quite good under Trump. Now, people may not like Trump's temperament, but at the end of the day, you have to look at how's the economy doing? How are gas prices? How much money do I have in my wallet? How is the border being secured? What kind of justices are we nominating to the U.S. Supreme Court? And on all those counts, Trump did a great job. And if voters are willing to put aside their dislike for his temperament and arguably his narcissism and look at the policies and what's going to benefit them the most, then I think it's going to go to Trump. And I think that's what we're going to see in 2024.
He's already rolled out his, I read in the paper today, his tax policies, coming in and lowering the corporate tax rate. Before I go to Kim and Nick, my thing is, I think sometimes we often forget, we've been focusing so much, the media, I think, focuses so much on the frenzy of the indictments and the personality. But I think I will give Trump credit for, yes, I think I will give him credit for bringing the jobs back, the manufacturing jobs, kind of taking on China, which actually carried over into Biden's administration. So a lot of the success of the CHIPS Act and these things has been carried over. And I want to commend President Biden for kind of holding on to that. Trump did lead the efforts to get the vaccine produced, which then Biden did. So there are things that the presidents have done, the former president, the president, that they've actually agreed on certain things. And I think Joe Biden has did a little too much too fast, but I think the ARP, the infrastructure was a success. The border's been a bit of a mess. Hasn't really been able to get gas prices down. And I think at his age, I think that at the end of the day, had he been a little bit younger, I think it'd be easier. But I think the fact that he's so old, people are just like, is it time for you to go? That's just my opinion. The Democrats really decided.
Well, I agree with you. I will say, though, that I think the media, which is largely on the left, and the indictments are actually helping Donald Trump because the American people
I agree.
That this is, our media back when I was growing up in the 80s, our media was not like this. our prosecutors believed in the rule of law, not using it as a political weapon. That's going to help Trump. And combine that with what I believe is really candidates that are not nearly as impressive. Trump gets the nomination, and Trump beats Biden, who really has not inspired the American people.
And before I go to Nick, what I'll add there is that I think, and actually I want Kim to give her opinion on this. I think that the Democrats are so focused on Trump that Adam Lamparello just lays a really good case based on policy of why you should support Trump if you're an independent or you're not. Whereas the Democrats are focusing so much on Trump, they're not talking policies. And we're even seeing this in North Carolina. People running for the General Assembly, they're not talking about the issues. And so I think people want issues. And I think that the Democrats, I think, are playing into the hands of the media, and that's not doing them any favor. Although he didn't do well in the midterms. So it'll be interesting to see how he recovers from that. Kim, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you, Steve. And, thank you for that wonderful introduction there, given that we threw the ball at you at the last minute. As always, you have come through like you have from the first day you ever started. I'm so happy to have you on board. So let's talk about this. And, Adam, I couldn't agree with you more that Trump is already in the lead. He's probably got this in the bag. But unfortunately, my ears already hurt from the noise that he just radiates. And I watched his speech in Nebraska, and I can't erase it out of my mind fast enough, like where he's going, well, yeah, you may have a big red button, but mine's bigger red button than yours, and I know how to use it. And I'm like, what kind of stupid playground are we on? And I'm so embarrassed to be in a country where this is the way we campaign. And Steve, you're absolutely right. Nobody's campaigning on the policies except David Walker. David Walker, no labels, are the only ones who have been going to Congress saying, this is how we fix America. This is how we're going to make it great again. And Adam, to add to some of this, of what we're discussing here, Trump may have done a few good things, and I'll give him credit, for doing some of those good things. But because of him, over 1 million people died during COVID because he knee-jerked and he didn't hire back pandemic experts that were right here in our own country, who were sent away to help other countries many years in the past and have done so. So I think that, given some of these things, I don't think Trump is the right candidate for our country, just like I didn't think he was previously. I think as a country, we consider ourselves intelligent. I wish we would act that way and behave that way and bring in some very intelligent candidates. And again, my favor of candidates are the no labels, that are trying to build on something. I don't think they're going to get there because I think the country lacks intelligence in itself to realize that there's a third party and that they can actually hire someone of intelligence instead of narcissism attitude on both sides. I'm sick of this. I want people to get up there and talk about how they're going to fix this country, not I'm one better than you. And that's all I heard with Trump. And DeSantis, I despise DeSantis. I feel like he will do nothing but run women and our future into the toilet. So that's how I feel. No choices. We have no choices. Nick?
Yeah.
Am I up?
Sure. We'll give it to you, Nick.
Really? Oh, good. Because the thing is, all I can say about Adam is not so fast, my constitutional predicting friend, about Donald Trump. Let's go take a look, because you got to dissect this guy a little bit closer about how wonderful he really is. And you can fact check this. I was shocked to see this stat, but go fact check this one. 25% of all of our national debt was acquired under the Trump administration. Can you imagine that? He piled on huge amounts of debt by reducing taxes for the wealthiest individuals and pummeling our grandchildren and our future by putting on a credit card 25% of all national debt. Let's go take a look at another one of his great things he accomplished in court. How about he was guilty of sexual harassment? Yes, he's got 4 indictments. We don't know you're innocent until you're proven guilty, except when you are proven guilty. So what is really going on here with the Republican Party? This is the best you can do? That's your best candidate? And they might be right because their candidates are so weak at the Republican level. Let's go look at Ron DeSantis or whatever the heck he is. All he is a mini Trump. So the thing is, he's just trying to be a Trump wannabe. Then we go look at Vivek Ramaswamy. Does he know anything about politics at all? Other than coming from India, ancestors coming from India, this guy doesn't have a clue what goes on outside the borders of the United States. Tim Scott, is he really a candidate? No. So what happens is you have such a poor field of candidates.
But I think I'd be curious whether Adam Lambrello thinks, could Ramaswamy be the nominee, though?
Ramaswamy be the nominee? Well, I mean, you're just going from bad to worse. So, the real problem with the Republican Party is they have no candidates. So by default, what apparently Adam is saying, because our party is so poor in terms of leadership and quality, that the best we can do is this: a guy who's got convictions for sexual harassment and also impounded us with 25% of all national debt.
Can I respond to that?
I don't.
Of course.
I tell you.
I'm quiet. Adam, this isn't a food
please,
fight. You get to
before
respond.
you do, Adam,
Go for it, Adam.
how did we
Of
get
course, you're up now.
How did we get real quickly before Adam answers the question? What I want to know is how we got so divided as a nation. I mean, how did we? If so many people are down in the middle of the road, that's what all the consultants say. Then why is the politics being driven by such extremes on both sides?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my view, it's being driven. We're not nearly as divisive as people think. What's happening is the media is amplifying extreme voices on both sides, extremely small minorities. And by that, I mean numbers. A small number of people on each side who are screaming the loudest, they're amplifying. So it gives the impression that there's division. But I think most of the country, like it's always been, is reasonable and moderate. And in response to Kimberly's comments about Trump, look, the bottom line is that a lot of people may not like Trump. I don't particularly like him, his personality, and his behavior. But looking at his policies when it comes to the Supreme Court, reducing corporate taxes, reducing individual tax rates, the border, no wars under him, a great economy, his policies were very effective. Now, as far as COVID goes, 1 million people did not die of COVID. The COVID numbers were ridiculously inflated and politicized. During the height of the pandemic, if you came into a hospital with a gunshot wound and tested positive for COVID, they'd call you a COVID-related death. And Anthony Fauci was one of the most disingenuous public servants I've seen in my lifetime, with his flip-flopping on masks, his funding of the Wuhan lab, and his flip-flopping on whether the virus originated from that lab. I think at the end of the day, what the American people have to think about as voters is themselves. What president is going to do something that's going to impact my life in a positive way? If you look at your wallet, if you look at gas prices, and if you look at the state of the economy, under Trump, it was strong. Under Biden, it's not. And that's why Trump is going to win.
Well, that's why we're in America. It's great to have these differences of opinion, and we're doing it. This is being done we have Mark Lee with us now. And so, Mark, welcome.
Yeah, popped in and got world politics going on. And over at Haytalk, glad to see Adam for president with Steve as his running mate, or maybe me as his running mate. We'll have the whole left and right kind of thing going on. So I've said that before, and maybe we can get Adam for president. And I know he's got some political aspirations and all along those lines. So we can have Adam take the lead and all in that space, and maybe we'll have that going on and all in that kind of way. I did have a quick question based on something that Adam said, and I kind of agree with him, which some people may be surprised at, but is part of the problem with social media and these bullhorns that extremes have, whether that's a AOC or whether that's a Marjorie Taylor Scott or whatever her name is, and all in that space, but they have these massive bullhorns and that kind of way that is different than what used to be. Because I mean, before you would have to hustle to get on radio, you'd have to hustle to get on TV, but now they can go to sites that are in their own lane and everything in that way. So, Adam, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because definitely you are a person that is more in the young set and all along those lines, and there does seem to be the trend with a lot more people that are using these social media outlets, even some of our political candidates.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I think that social media, the problem with social media is that it gives a voice to idiots, and millions of them. And I'm not including AOC in that. As far as Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, I'll reserve judgment on that. But it gives a voice to so many people who are low information voters, who don't know what they're talking about, and it amplifies those voices at the expense of the majority of people who don't use social media, who are actually reasonable. So social media has not only been a detriment to political discourse, it's been a detriment to common decency, and it highlights the fact that part of the problem with this country is that we have a lot of idiots who are voting, and that's why I don't believe in the right to vote for everybody. And I will never believe in the right to vote for everybody. I believe in the right to vote for people who have at least a certain baseline of knowledge. I don't believe in allowing KKK members to vote. I don't believe in allowing racists, sexists, homophobics to vote. I don't think.
Does that include Trump, who, got accused for sexual harassment?
No, it doesn't include Trump, because the accusations were false. And I believe we should protect people against false allegations.
I don't think they were false, because Adam, you know this as well as I do. That's probably one of the toughest accusations to take to court and to try. And you really have to have a lot of evidence to go either way. But to win that years later, I mean, she must have had some serious evidence to win. I don't think she had a jury behind her. I really
I did have a question.
But she accused him of rape, and he was acquitted.
Yeah, but I'm here.
I don't believe her.
Harassment to me is just as bad, but we have that here. We have that where men were accused of rape, and then the charges were dropped down to a lesser charge.
The whole notion of plea bargaining. It's the whole notion.
Right, and those charges were brought 2 decades after they allegedly happened. I don't believe that woman. I think she's lying, just like I don't believe Christine Blasey Ford either.
Well, you can say that, but I had the same conversation with a couple of women that I've worked with, and we all were sexually harassed at one point in time in our careers, especially at Nortel. We all have the horrendous story, maybe 2 or 3. And when we went to legal for help in the area, we were turned down. So, when something happened 20 years ago, you didn't get any support. So I'm glad to see somewhere justice is being served. I really am, because, after hearing even some of my friends' stories, that, we finally started talking about it after all of these years last night. And I realized, wow, we never had a voice. And good for her for doing that.
Kimberly,
Adam, real quick question.
Kimberly, because Kimberly makes a really good point. I mean, sexual harassment is despicable, and any reasonable person would condemn that. But I wonder why people are talking about Trump and his sexual harassment conviction when Bill Clinton was having oral sex in the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky, and the Democrats were rallying to his side, and his popularity went up to 63%. The hypocrisy undermines the legitimacy of the argument.
Hey, I don't know if you heard.
So why do we keep voting them in? I think we need to stop.
Hey, Kim, I don't know if you heard the news show this morning, but it actually involved the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. But there is a woman in Virginia who is a candidate and all along those lines, but she put on some social media, some very interesting social media. I think it was Chatterbait or something like that, but it is definitely a blue kind of thing. And she was putting some of her sexual activities that her and her husband were doing and was actually asking for a token. So she's getting some pushback from that. And I don't know if Adam had followed that case or had any thoughts about it, because she's getting some pushback as a major candidate for a major office, one state up in Virginia.
I would not vote for anybody who has an online live stream having sex with their husband and also asking viewers to pay to do specific sexual acts. I think that is terrible judgment, and I would not vote for that person.
And speaking of not voting, the question I had that you asked earlier about the notion of an informed populace, and I do agree that we probably need a more informed populace. But there are a lot of folks, I brought it up on this show, Steve knows I brought it up, there are a lot of folks that get those lovely little packages, and depending on what the pack tells them to vote, or the interest group, whether it's the Sierra Club, or whether here we have the I'm trying to get the name of it, the People's Alliance or something like that, they will oftentimes give you who they think you should vote for, and a lot of people vote blindly. So how would you get past that? Because a lot of folks are issue-oriented, so they let these interest groups dictate who they are voting for without necessarily doing the studies themselves. So how would you address that, Adam? Because that is a complaint that I've had for a while, is that there are a lot of blind voters out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, before you can drive a car, you have to get a driver's license.
Mhm.
So before you can vote, why shouldn't you have to pass two types of tests? One, where you certify under penalty of perjury that you have a certain moral character. You're not a racist, a sexist, transphobic, homophobic. And why shouldn't you have a short test that asks you basic questions about the function of government? Like, for example, do you know how many people are on the Supreme Court? Do you know how many branches of government there are? So that we at least have some base of knowledge. And at the same time, we exclude people who lack the moral character to contribute to our democracy. And that would be, like I said, nobody in the KKK should vote. Nobody who walks around hurling racist and homophobic and sexist slurs should vote. I'm sorry.
I agree
with you. But Adam,
be...
how are you going to get past some people that would argue, and rightfully so, that even though historically there are three estates, but there are people that could legitimately say that there is a fourth estate. I'm thinking about what we're part of, the press. So if they tell you that there are four estates, are they necessarily wrong?
I don't know if they're wrong or right. What I do know, though, is that it's like Kimberly is saying that we want to have really good leaders.
Right.
Well, you're not going to have really good leaders when you have morons voting. I don't think the high school jock who's obsessed with the high school cheerleader and smoking weed all the time should be allowed to vote because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I don't think someone who marches for white supremacy should be allowed to vote. I think they're cancers on our country, and I don't believe in the right to vote for everyone. I'm sorry.
I got to leave it in about 2 minutes, but and I'll be back on Thursday. But I want to thank you all for the honor to host the show. It's wonderful. The joke I would have is that wouldn't it be something if we went back to the way it was back in the 1700s when the top, so what if it was Biden, Trump, Biden? Whoever gets second place becomes the VP. That'd be interesting. Biden, Trump, Biden. They'd be forced to get along. Maybe it would shut the media up and they would start working together. I think that would be really, really funny. That's something we have to think about.
Well, all I gotta say, Steve, I feel like we are back in 1692, when they were hanging witches. And I'm just waiting for that to come, real soon, especially with the way the Republican Party acts against women and their rights. That, 1692, I will say this, they forgot one. So
they didn't get you. They forgot one. They didn't catch up with you.
Final thought is this, and I'm going to set the stage for future topics, but I think the final analysis today, before I hand it back over to Mark and Kimberly, is that, all around the world, we're seeing complete disruption of democratic institutions. Whether it's, obviously we got the war in Ukraine, Russia, Turkey, dictatorships, authoritarianism rising. And my theory of it, and I think it's something we're going to talk about when we talk about world politics, is what makes a democracy strong. And I read a book called The Narrow Corridor that Fareed Zakaria recommended. I find it to be interesting. It said, you can criticize the United States all you want, but the fact of the matter is we have a government that's strong, that prevents chaos, but a society that's free enough that you have civil rights. So I can go outside and burn a flag in front of a person who gave their lives defending it. But that's my life as an American. If tonight at the council meeting, if they said, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I could, as a council member, not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And that is my right, even though I think that would be disrespectful in my opinion. But I think what's happened is over the years, many, many countries we've seen become democracies overnight. I'm having an election. I'm a democracy. And then how often later we see tanks rolling in and then taking over the government. And that's Venezuela is a perfect example. I used to go there. It's a dictatorship. Are these dictators rising because one party rule or one person rule makes it easier to deliver to those citizens of the country than a democracy? Because democracy is hard work. Like my favorite president, an American president, said, Andy Shepard, which was played by Michael Douglas, it's advanced citizenship. You've got to want it bad. And that's really, I think, so that's my closing remarks. But I think that's a good topic for world politics because, and I'm going to hand it over to Adam to just give me his insight on that before I leave, is kind of this disruption of the post-World War II era, where it was just accepted that, you were going to have democracies, and now, people are just invading, like Russia. I'm just going to invade a democracy, right? Get away, isn't that concerning?
Yeah, and I think that the biggest threat to democracy is a lack of an informed citizenry and a lack of a robust middle class. And I think that that's the biggest threat to the United States, is that we have a prevalence of stupidity. I'm sorry to be that blunt. And that is being magnified by the media. Everywhere you go, our institutions are declining in their legitimacy, whether it be the Supreme Court, whether it be the media, and people themselves are not educated, and they're motivated by prejudices and stereotypes, yet we allow them to vote. So the biggest threat to democracy is not outside, it's from within.
Hey, Adam,
I agree with you too on the misinformation of social media, that we've had no truth in literacy of any kind for any of our country at all. No truth in media, and it's just been very disappointing because people are misled so much. And even Trump. I have to say Trump. Calls them out. But, Trump calls out the people who puts him down, and Biden calls out the media sector. I'm trying to hope that we keep Pod TV very open-minded, very free for both political parties, but really try to keep it to the truth and to the facts. Make sure that we stay on topic with what's important for the country. And I think, Steve brought this up, that we need to bring this back to policies.
Speaking of policies and everything, I've got a question.
We need our politicians talking policies every time they open their mouth.
Or maybe whoever.
I don't want this, my button's bigger than your button. I don't want that anymore.
No, and speaking of politics, and this is, I know you're.
Well, maybe I'm going to end with I guess I'm feeling very spunky tonight for my council meeting. It might be the double cappuccino I just had, but maybe whoever wins the president needs to go meet the Wizard of Oz. They need to get a heart, they need to get courage, and they need to get a brain. And if you have those three things, we're going to do okay.
Well, I mean, we used to live in a country where when you grew up, you graduated high school, graduated college, if you worked hard, you could make it into the middle class. And people relied upon themselves, their hard work, their values to be successful. In the late 60s, LBJ introduced a welfare state that has been crushing to various populations and has eroded those values. I think democracy depends on informed citizenry and on the idea that individual responsibility and opportunity are the cornerstones of that middle class and ultimately a healthy citizenry.
Absolutely.
Well, Adam, I'm going to add to that Bush's administration didn't help with No Child Left Behind.
No problem, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate you, Steve. Hey, Adam, just really
No
quickly.
Child Left Behind, I think, totally destroyed the level of education that we're finally graduating with. They graduated with no education. They were just passed through. And I think that's why we have such a big problem with ignorance today.
Speaking of ignorance and everything, I was curious about Adam's thoughts about this. I'm actually going to bring one of these to a Durham situation and the other to a more national one. But there is a union strike that is going on, and apparently they want the same kind of pay raises that the executives want. So I think that they're asking for something like 46% raise and all in that in the UAW, which is the United Auto Workers strike. And definitely some of their executives have been getting those kind of pay bumps and everything. And here in Durham, our sanitation workers just ended their strike and apparently are going to come to work, back to work on Tuesday. So they were asking for a raise as well. It was nowhere near those kind of percentages, but they were asking for a raise, and they were even doing, which I find unusual for unions to be doing, but they set up a GoFundMe page that has already raised over $40,000 as they were trying to get their supporters to back them. So I was just wondering your thoughts about unions and whether unions are still a legitimate force in there, and do they have a legitimate gripe by looking at some of their executives and their pay rates and wanting to be, even not similarly compensated, at least better compensated?
Well, I think unions in most contexts serve an important function, although I would say the teachers union, led by Randy Weingartner, has serious problems with corruption and with being too politicized. But what I don't agree with is that kind of a pay raise, because I don't believe those workers contribute the same value or assume the same risk as the executives in the company. And I think there's a hierarchy for a reason. That's not to say they shouldn't be paid more, but I think the degree to which that they're asking for more pay is unreasonable. I mean, when someone creates a company, for example, and it becomes successful, they deserve to reap those profits because they created it and they took that risk. And their ingenuity and their risk taking is what led to, the employees that they have and the success that they have. Now, those employees did not do that, so they do not deserve the same pay or anywhere near it. What they do deserve is the ability to contract consensually for a wage that they agree upon. And that's why capitalism is a good thing, because if they don't like the offer they're given, they can go somewhere else. And that's why I think that wages are based on the value that a person provides. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, but Adam, well, to counter that, what about the fact that a lot of the raises that these executives are getting are coming from their board, and it's kind of like them rewarding themselves? I hear what you're saying, that they are taking some of the risk, but a lot of times they are maybe not as being as risk adverse as they are doing, because they are definitely in some places possibly gouging the public with some of the raises that they've had. Because I don't know that every executive needs a 45 to a 50% to 500% raises and all in that space. So I hear what you're saying about maybe not having those kind of raises for the workers. By the way, here in Durham, they were asking for a $5,000 bonus, pay workers for all work outside their job titles, and hiring all temporary workers as permanent workers, which all of that seems relatively reasonable to me and everything. And I don't know whether they got that or did not get that. But what is your thoughts around this notion of some of these big companies giving their bosses some raises that still has their employers scratching their heads? I'm thinking that even like some of the middle management at some of these big companies like Glaxo and Cree and IBM are scratching their head over some of these raises.
Well, it's kind of like when I think of professional baseball and I see a player sign a contract for 10 years worth $300 million. You think, oh my gosh, how could they do that? One person is making that much money. But my problem is that it's really hard to quantify. It's really hard to draw a line, like how much of a raise is too much for these executives? How much of a pay raise is appropriate for middle management or employees? I think when the government gets involved in trying to figure that out, that's not a good thing for for capitalism, and that's not a good thing for companies. I think ultimately people have a right to contract as they want. They can leave the company. They can do what they want. If this station becomes extraordinarily popular, where the people who founded it are now making $10 million a year, what should I make as a panelist? I probably should make a very minute fraction of that, and for good reason, because I'm participating in the show, but I didn't create it. I didn't take the risk. And I think that is something that warrants their higher salaries and raises. But where you draw the line between how much is too much, I don't think it's possible to do that. And I think that if you're going to try to do that, you're going to make arbitrary decisions that don't satisfy anybody.
I agree with you, Adam, that I think people have a choice. Okay. And we become a product of our choices, and people can make a decision to say, you know what, this just isn't working out for me. I love what I do, but I need to make a living, and they can go somewhere else and make that living. There were times in my life I worked 2 or 3 jobs, just because I had to sustain. I needed the money. And I wanted to build where I was going in one of the other ones. So sometimes you just have to make those choices. But again, to sit there and have expectations that you're entitled to a certain amount of money just because you're on a show and maybe you're popular doesn't entitle you to taking away everything that Nick or someone else built to get there. And I think too many people come in at the last minute going, and I've had this done with my own companies. I built it, I struggled, I drove it all the way to where they needed to go. And somebody comes in at the last part of the football game and they think, oh, I want, 50% of your equity. And I'm like, doing what? And Nick's seeing this too. He has seen this too. So I think people just need to become more realistic. And I think I'm not a big fan of the unions. I'm really not. I think that if I think like for state jobs and things like that, if we were doing our job right, teachers would be paid properly. And I think we're backwards in this country. Our teachers need to be paid way better because they're building our future. They're teaching our future. And I want them rewarded for teaching our future. I want our future to come out educated so that they know how to vote intelligently. Not like somebody who came out during the Bush administration. I love Bush. I just thought everything he did was stupid. I like him as a human. I just think everything he did was stupid.
I hear what you're saying, but I actually like some of the aspects of union. I'm not a big fan of union busters, and I do know that that's going on, including with some of the, not just Republicans, but some of the Democrats as well. I think on one of our shows in the past, I mentioned the Pinkertons, and we do know that the Pinkertons were notorious for being union busters and all in that space. So I think that unions have a place, and I've actually got some friends that work in the union space here in North Carolina in terms of being involved in union activity. So I do think that they have a place for driving the cost, driving like negotiation around pricing, negotiations around conditions, because that is what they have been very good at, is making sure that people are not in unsafe working conditions and a number of other things. So I think that unions historically and even to the present day have a role. And I do know folks that are involved in everything from teachers unions to the fight for 15. And there are some folks, including some folks on our show, that may not be the biggest fans of folks getting better pay, but we've been stuck on stupid as far as I'm concerned for the minimum wage for a while and everything. So we haven't had a minimum wage raise in a while, and the cost of living has continued to go up. So that is problematic. I don't know if Adam agrees with me, but it's problematic that we haven't had that for a minute.
Yeah, I think it's problematic, but I think that some of the demands that unions make can be excessive. For example, let's say that this show became extremely popular. Kimberly was the founder, you're the host, and I'm the panelist. Let's say it made $20,000 per show. I would argue that Kimberly should probably get somewhere in the range of maybe 12 to 14,000. Since you're the host, you should probably get, 4 to 5,000. And then I get the remainder, which would be what, 1 to 2,000, because that would reflect the contribution that is being made. And I don't see that as inequality. I see that as fairness.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and everything. Speaking of fairness, and you mentioned him earlier, since it is world politics, and I was going to get to him in our conversation, but are you having any fear that we're going to mask up again? Because I did see that your favorite person, yes, Mr. Fauci, has said that he didn't want to speak ahead of the government and he didn't want to be encouraging the government to mask up. But I have heard that there are small enclaves that are thinking that they need to mask up again, and that we may be heading back to more masking than what's going on. I know that I get around because I'm at one of those jobs that Kimberly was talking about, where you have multiple jobs in order to make ends meet and all into that space. And I got here by bus, and the bus is still free and will be free till July of 2024, because they're still having those benefits from the pandemic, and they extended it for another year. And I have seen some of the people on the bus that are still wearing masks, though I wouldn't say it is the majority. But what is your thoughts around this notion that both here and worldwide we may be going back to mask. I don't think we're going to be going back to massive COVID shots, but they are rolling out some new Moderna shots and other things. So maybe we will. But Adam, what's your thoughts? Are we going to be having some of these masks, or are folks fed up with masks and they don't want to wear masks anymore?
I don't think we're going to have mask mandates. I do think that some people will choose to voluntarily wear masks, even though the evidence shows masks don't really work. And I think part of the problem is that Fauci from the beginning kind of contradicted himself on masks and a lot of things. So I think some people who still do, and some people who, get concerned if there's a spike will do that. But I don't think there should be any mandates, because I don't think that they work. And I think that the effects of some of those COVID policies really hurt the economy. It hurt people who had health problems that couldn't get access to health care. It hurt people with mental illnesses. And I think at this point it should be, wear a mask if you want to wear a mask. But I think we're beyond COVID and should stay there.
Well, I'm aware of several people who are getting, I guess, the new version of COVID. Apparently, it takes a while for some of the older people to work through and get past it. Some of them, it's been 3 to 4 weeks. I think I agree with you. I think if you're the kind of person who needs to prevent yourself from getting sick, you should have been wearing masks a long time ago. And that if you need to be wearing a mask, you should be wearing it whenever you go out anyway. But I don't think it prevents it unless you're doing your hand washing your clothes, hazmat suit practices. I just think we all just need to make sure we do good practices. Don't go to work sick. Please, for God's sakes, do not go to work sick. I despise that more than anything when I go to work and somebody's in there sick. I'm not sick. I'm not contagious. And then tomorrow, everybody's out sick.
Everybody's out sick.
You know what one of the problems with Fauci was? The problem with Fauci made a very, very fundamental error, which is when you talk too much, you lose your credibility.
Mm-hmm.
He went on too many media stations, and he should have been more strategic about how he communicated.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree. I think that he was not the candidate for a pandemic control. I still think we should have hired the pandemic experts who really do exist. They've done a phenomenal job in the past of preventing widespread, fatal diseases in other countries. And I truly believe that we need to make sure that we have them in place if it ever happens again. There's no reason not to, right? Why get burned again? Why say it's never going to happen again? I think it will. I think it's more planned than not. I think it will be a strategic warfare tactic against us, as opposed because we reacted so stupid the first time. I think that we'll be, Mo, Larry, and what's his name, Curly, again. I really do. And it's just unfortunate that we have yet to learn.
Yeah. Speaking of not learning and everything, Adam, just out of curiosity, apparently Senator Tim Scott, because you mentioned him earlier as well, Senator Tim Scott is getting a lot of flack because apparently he is one of the few candidates that is out there that is still in the singles lanes, and is one that is single myself. And in the 61 space, I can see what he's saying, but he's saying that people point out that he's single because they can't say that he's black. So he is defending his unmarried status, and it's garnering more attention over the course of the campaign. And some are insinuating that because he is single, that he must be gay or part of the gay community and all along those lines, which is actually kind of ironic because I know he's had some very interesting stances around the morality within that community and all in that space. But I just wondering, should we even care about a candidate's social status and all in that space? Because he has a theory about why people are drawn to the fact that he's never been married. It's like different form of discrimination or bias is what he said. That's what he told the Washington Post. You can't say I'm black because that would be terrible. So find something else that you can attack. He also said other GOP contenders may be seeking to sow seeds of doubt about his campaign and finding a way to say that guy isn't one of us, with the insinuations about his personal life. And apparently now they're saying he has a girlfriend and everything. But does it really matter whether our political leaders have spouses, girlfriends, or whatever the case may be?
No, not at all. And it doesn't matter if they're gay. And I don't know why anybody would care about that. And that highlights, again, the stupidity of some people who think that that is a matter that even should be discussed. The only exception to that would be, if you're going on a pornographic website and you're live streaming having various sexual acts with your husband and asking people to pay to see very lurid sexual acts, that to me is a terrible exercise of judgment. But whether someone's gay or straight or single or married, that's their choice, and that choice should be respected with the same equal dignity that is, given to every human being.
No, I agree. Kim might have some thoughts about this, but his other quote is, half of America's adult population is single for the first time, Scott said at the time. To suggest that somehow being married or not married is going to be the determining factor of whether you're a good president or not, it sounds like we're living in 1963 and not 2020.
Well, if he's not married, maybe that's a positive, because maybe, I know a lot of married people, and boy, are they unhappy. Anyway, go on.
I agree. No, I have to agree with Adam. I think there's less distraction. Okay. I truly believe that there would be less distraction. You could focus for your 4 years on specifically the needs of the country. And really put all your energy into that rather than worrying about your family, your wife, your kids. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in the family. And I just feel like that maybe it would be good to have a president that's not married.
Yeah, Kim,
over the summer, for running for president?
Over the summer, one of my good friends, who's married, she got pregnant, and they came over for a big party, and they were all congratulating her. And I was the only one who said, I don't know what to congratulate you for, because you have just consigned yourself to a life of absolute hell for at least the next 5 years. And, everyone looked at me like I was crazy. But, I'm kidding.
Adam, what are you talking about? And I can say this as the 61-year-old single man. What are you talking about 5 years? My brother has got 2 nephews. They are 14 and 15. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and they said that with the new way that people are going and everything, that even when you are an adult, that they know quite a few people in their 20s and 30s, and I can't remember your age, Adam, that are still living with their parents even after they get out of high school or college. So it's not just the 5 years of babies, but there could be 25 to 30 years, because I think even Kim has to deal with her kids and everything, even though they are very much adults. They don't live in the same house, but she is still very much helping them in raising them even as adult men and all in that space. So I'm going like, yeah, it might be more than 5 years of hell.
Yeah, that's true. And look, I just think everybody's entitled to make the choices that are good for them, and they shouldn't be judged. So Tim Scott, whatever his sexuality or whatever his status is, it's fine with me.
Hey, you know what? I think Adam also kind of said it doesn't matter. Heck, we voted in Clinton again for, doing what he did. We should, to me, that is an ethical situation, but what we need to do is start weighing and measuring people based on the policies that they're trying to do, what they really think that they can do for America, not who's one up on anyone. We need to focus on policies. And so I think any candidate who steps up on that stage and starts giving me formulas and statistics and the how-tos, that's the person for me. I don't care if it's man, woman, I don't care. I want solutions.
Yeah, speaking of solutions, Lee Newton Rhodes had a couple of comments in the chat that I'll bring up and everything, since he wasn't able to jump on the conversation, but he was asking, should government workers be able to be fired, similar to a private industry, where we were having that conversation around unions. And he was also saying, if masks work, why did many people working to clean up the WC, the World Trade Center, after 9/11 get lung disease, even though they wore protective gear? I do remember seeing them wearing that protective gear. So I don't know if you got any comments to those 2 comments that he made and everything along those lines, either you or Kim.
I do. One is a common conversation I have with my physicians is people were not wearing them properly, and we're not doing it, the whole process properly. There's a proper way to do it. And, if you are wearing a hazmat suit and then you go somewhere, because I used to work in a nuclear power plant. And if you go in and you don't come out and cleanse your suit and then cleanse your, and then take the suit off and cleanse. If you don't do it properly, you just breathed in everything you were trying to prevent. So I think the problem was people were not doing it properly.
No, I can definitely see that. Hey, Adam, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up very shortly and all along those lines, but one of the things I was curious about, and Lee's brought up on some of our other shows, is how much does morality need to be a conversation? Because one of the other things that Tim Scott said, Newsweek reported that he considers homosexuality a morally wrong choice like adultery, and we are by nature sinful, he said, sadly. All these positions stem from what he calls timeless principles. So how much should we care about people's morality, and or do you feel that morality is something that should be a conversation within the political lanes? Because definitely we saw that on both the right and the left, where people were trying to make moral judgments for others. But how much do you think morality needs to be part of the overall conversation?
I don't think it should be much, if at all, part of the conversation, because morality is relative. It's very difficult to say a person is immoral because they cheated on their spouse. Well, you don't know the circumstances in which they did so. It's very difficult to say a person is immoral because they have multiple partners, whatever the case may be. So you're making judgments without knowing that person's circumstances. I think morality only becomes relevant at the extremes, when people engage in extreme conduct that any reasonable person would consider immoral. But again, it's hard to define that. I think what people should be concerned about is, what impact is this president going to make on our country and our society, practically speaking, economically speaking? Because I think that is what's going to make our middle class stronger and our democracy more robust.
It sounds like you need to run. I do know that Nick, and he was here earlier, had put out this notion, and some people say that he was joking about it, but some folks might go for it, of having Taylor Swift be our president, because apparently she has been paying her workers and from top to bottom and doing quite well in that, because she was making a whole heap of money. So I guess she was feeling that she.
I don't care what her policies are. I would vote for her just because she's pretty.
Of course you would.
Of course.
I would vote for, actually, I'm the one who started the campaign for Taylor Swift, because she's been going into every city. One, she generates $1 million a day. So you should marry her. But she literally generates $1 million a day, probably more than what the U.S. can possibly ever think about doing. But she also goes into every city and she goes, "What's your problem?" And she fixes it. She doesn't sit there and talk about it and, say what if. She hands them what is necessary to fix it. She takes the money and does it. And that's something no one in our country really knows how to do. And I think she would do a darn good job of it.
She is
very pretty.
She's very pretty and all along those lines. Adam, if we're having wishful thinking and all in that space, if you were going to marry Taylor Swift and all in that space, I have recently learned that Halle Berry has gotten a divorce and she's only 5 years younger than me. So I think that if you could have Taylor, I could have a Halle Berry as my wife and everything. So
Deal.
What do you think?
Yes. And you know what? Something about Taylor Swift that also is very attractive is her intelligence and her business savvy. She's knows smart. What she's doing. But Taylor, if you ever listen to this program, consider my marriage proposal open and continuing to be so for whatever amount of time it takes to convince you.
We got a comment from a fan here. Maybe you can't make judgments, but their behavior and morality makes up a person. I would vote for her because she offers solutions and fixes. Oh, thank you. Loves to paint. That was beautiful.
Yep.
And thank you for watching.
Very good comment. And definitely there are some other folks that have some interesting viewpoints that are out there. I think that there have been a couple of rappers that have talked about running. I'm not ready to vote for some of those rappers that were talking about running for office and everything. But, some of the members of Public Enemy want to run for office, and a couple of others that have some interesting political views. I might be down for that. Some of the other ones might be a little bit too extreme and all along those lines. But there might be some political candidates, and who knows, maybe we'll get LeBron to run. And maybe, hey, I've got a new ticket for you, Adam. LeBron and Charles Barkley.
Deal.
Deal.
Yeah, but just because he's a great basketball player, hey, LeBron is also an intelligent person who has a lot of intangible qualities that a president needs: judgment, hard work, tenacity, perseverance. But I think we're missing the big point in this show is that you guys are talking about Taylor Swift, you're talking about LeBron James. What about me?
I did.
I said that earlier. I said
I
that as soon as I
said
came on. I said that you need to run. I've even offered to be your vice president. I also threw Steve out there. You didn't accept my notion of being the vice president. I've also said that when you run and we do the whole campaign events, because they have those massive parties, that I'm an event planner. So we can definitely have that going and everything. So we can have your whole victory celebration organized from right here in North Carolina. So
I'd be
why
your number
don't we
one.
have it so that Kimberly will be the no, Kimberly, I want you to be the first lady, and then Mark, you can be the vice president, and we just have to make sure we win New Jersey because that's where I'm from. That's going to be important.
I think you would have no problems winning New Jersey, and I would be by your side the whole way, Adam. I've always said it, and I mean it.
And I mean it as well. And I've got a secret weapon for New Jersey because I have a cousin that is military. He is a retired military. I think he made it up to lieutenant colonel and everything. He lives in Atlanta, and he and one of his business partners are actually working on warp technology. So he was originally from that whole area of New Jersey. I think that they grew up around the Inglewood area, and then he lived in Asbury Park, and then his mother, before she passed, was a principal up there in Sparta. So they definitely have much of New Jersey covered, even though the family, his parents have passed, but he's still around. His brother is actually a GBI officer down there in Georgia. So we might be able to get you both New Jersey and Georgia if I can get them to back your campaign. So are you down for that? So they are.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
This kind of
speaking of New Jersey, we need to get up there sometime. I hear the food is great. But we need to wrap up. But don't forget, we're going to be doing this routinely. Bring some of your ideas of who would make great candidates. It doesn't just need to be the president. We're looking for good leaders. And I think that that's what this show is going to be all about, is bringing attention to the world about good leadership, uniting the world again so that we all kind of work together again. And thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Next time.